having an excellent day. I am actually here at my practice, at my office, at the facility. I am decided to have a short break and have a discussion while I'm getting a few things done at the facility, getting things up and ready for my clients and so on. So I wanted to have a brief discussion with you all about just an open topic on mental health. This is a Q&A session where everybody can ask whatever questions you have about mental health, and I would answer those questions to the best of my ability. I haven't went live in a bit. I did a few videos. I hope that you all like some of the videos that I talked about, the different topics that I had. I hope that you enjoyed it. I talked about a wide range of different things as it relates to relationships and other content creators who are speaking. I made reference to mental health professionals who are giving poor advice. I talked about the overusage of certain mental health terminology. Um, and so I focused a lot on that. So today is just an open topic on mental illness. And I want people to understand that a lot of my experience is dealing with severely mentally ill individuals. Um, when I began as a licensed person, the majority of my clientele were severely mentally ill people who had extreme bipolar with psychotic features, who had schizoaffective disorder, who had major depression, who were suicidal, frequent hospitalizations, and also they had schizophrenia, frequent hospitalizations. I've been very, very accustomed to dealing with people who are at risk of harming themselves and somebody else. So, as I began to grow into my private practice, is where I began to see more functional types of clients, clients who were in school, who had jobs, who had children, who were more highly functional, may have had some of those diagnoses or not, but they function at a higher level, and because of functioning at a certain level, it brought upon them a whole set of other unique sets of circumstances and challenges that would not necessarily um, be representative of someone who is severely mentally ill and has to be under the care of someone else, or potentially hospitalized, or institutionalized, or necessarily living under the tutelage of someone else. Um, One of the things that I have noticed, guys, um, that I've seen on social media, okay, is the fact that the rejection of unbiased professional advice, um, based on your own opinions. Okay. And so I strayed away outside of this channel to give that advice, to give that assessment, to give you the information that is necessary, because part of this channel, the reason why I decided to create content was for the purposes of psychoeducation, because there's so much bad information. There's so much bad information given by people who don't have a mental health background. They don't have a mental health background. And also, what I didn't like was that there's bad information given by people who have some association with a family member or an association, or within a workplace perspective, or whatever environment they're in, that claim they know things that are not necessarily consistent with the DSM, that is not consistent with the field. So I want to preface to people that when you are hearing me speak, I've seen it all. I've done it all. I have seen the worst of the worst. There are so many examples of me dealing with severe mental illness that I don't talk about. I'm talking about the fact that people who are on the brink of committing suicide, people who are on the brink of being homeless, or finding the client homeless, people who are living in shelters, people who are getting ready to lose all their whole family. I just recently, guys, dealt with a mother who lost custody of all her children. Okay? So for the mothers that are listening, how just try to empathize. How would that mentally affect you, in which you lost all of your children just by the sign of a judge's signature? Okay? And so we have to understand, guys, that mental health cannot be generalized. If you are anybody, even though the features of every diagnosis is what it is, and there's instrument and appraisals that can detect where you are functioning wise, bipolar to one person may totally look different to another person. Someone who's schizophrenic, another schizophrenic person may look totally different. They may have similar, the symptoms may be similar as far as the criteria of what they fit. The psychosis may look different, but they still have psychosis. But it just looks different. It presents different. And so, no, I rarely do videos in which I generalize that there's a one size fits all for any type of situation. That's one of the reasons why on this channel, and I'm gonna say this for guys, and shout out to Miss T Pre, shout out to Mahogany for here, shout out to Conscious Energy for being here. Man, there's so many people right now flooding me to talk about relationships on this channel. And I'm going to talk about relationships, but I cannot totally I can't totally assign myself to just that particular topic 70-80% of the time, because in my practice 70-80% of the time I'm doing mental health. Now I'm gonna be honest, I do a lot of marital and relationship therapy. I do a lot. I do a lot of marriage and family related therapy. I deal with a lot of clients who have relationship issues as it relates to romantic relationships, family issues, marriages, divorces, children. You name it. I've covered the gambit. But I am unwilling to talk about relationships like doing 15 to 20 videos on relationships. I may mix it up, or I may talk about relationships. I may talk about the stresses related to relationships. I may talk about issues of dating, issues of marriage, issues related to relationships. And to me, the goal is not necessarily the label that is assigned to that relationship, is whether or not the relationship is functional. Okay? There are certain spaces that pride themselves on advocating for marriage. Okay? There are certain spaces that advocate for submissiveness. Okay? Certain spaces advocate for you to look outside of your community for someone that's not in your community, have no experience in their community. There's certain community that advocate for you to do all of these things, but no one talks about, when you make that choice, what are the pros and cons? See, no one says that, you know, if you date this type of woman, yeah, you're going to get these things, and then you're also going to get that. And then how can you deal with this? No one talks about, if you deal with this type of man, these are the sort of circumstances that present positive and negative, because nobody is perfect. Okay. No, so it's a lot of surface level discussions from single people. And I'll put the emphasis. There's a lot of surface level discussions on relationships from people who don't have long-term relationships. And to me, I find that frightening that you're on an application and the people who are actually the more popular on these discussions are people who failed or don't have a positive track record or nor the training nor the professional training, okay, and experience to talk about these things, but they have an answer for everything. Listen, guys, okay, as it relates to mental health, as it relates to substance abuse, as it relates to trauma, as it relates to depression, anxiety, work-related issues, stress-related things, and so forth. Listen, guys. Listen to me. I am a professional. I have over 20 years of experience. I've been licensed in the state of Texas now for 19 years. I got over 25 years of experience. I don't have all the answers. Can somebody just say, I don't know for once in their goddamn life? It's okay to say, I don't know. It is okay to say, I don't have an answer for this. I may have to do my research and come up with some suggestions, okay? Because I want y'all to understand, in the counseling relationship, my therapeutic frame of reference, I don't give advice. A good therapist, a good counselor doesn't give advice. A good therapist helps you to help yourself. A good therapist works in conjunction or collectively with you. Okay? And you learn to help yourself. I don't want a codependent relationship in which you think you come to this therapy session and I give you all the answers. If that's the case, I have failed. There are people right now who are jumping on panel to panel, who are on getting interviewed, and they have an answer for every goddamn thing. They feel like this is the reason for this. This is the reason for that. This is why. This is the cause. This is the cause. When you are dealing with the human psyche and the relationships that are connected or interconnected with a human being, there are an infinite level of potential variables that can influence why someone feels, think, and behave in a certain way. Okay? And there is no one size fits all as it relates to mental health, as it relates to relationships, as it relates to sexual trauma, as it relates to physical trauma. Okay? As it relates to marriage and family. Okay? I don't know everything. Being a good therapist is a lifelong journey. I would hope to believe that I am a better therapist now than I was 10 years ago, than what I was 15 years ago. Okay? Hopefully in the next 5 to 10 years, I will be even a better, more experienced therapist. Now, have I built myself to have an arsenal of ways to respond and to structure things a certain way based on my experiences? Yes. Handling things a certain way. Okay. Dealing with certain things. Developing a therapeutic relationship. Listen, one of the most important things, and I want you all to understand this for those who are watching, one of the most important things as it relates to what a therapist does is to refer out. Okay? When you look at what therapists do, we can assist. We can provide therapy. Okay? We can assist, provide therapy, we can consult, and lastly, we can refer. Okay? We can refer. And so a great therapist knows when they may not be the most, I would say, qualified person to speak on or treat a certain thing, or they know when to fall back and say, I may need to do my research more on this, or I may need to consult with a person that I know that works and specialize in the area. And I would rather not give you an answer than to give you a bad answer. Okay. But unfortunately, guys, you got these quote unquote, you know, individuals that feel like if I don't answer the question, that means I'm not an expert. That means that I'm not competent. That means that I am not looking. I'm not necessarily a good enough professional, or I'm not an expert. Number one, an expert, for whatever way you want to define that. Okay. Um, your expertise is fluid. It should gradually expand. Okay. Now, when we think of experts, we think of people not bound by anecdotal experiences, but have a structured and designed setting to acquire that knowledge in a uniform manner, meaning education. Okay, meaning education, meaning internship, meaning practicums, meaning you are under the tool as someone who has mastered that information. Okay, there are a host of certifications, there are a host of licensures that you can receive and degrees that run in line with those certifications. Okay. I have been licensed. Okay. My licensure allows me, I don't have a specified license that, like, say for instance, a substance abuse therapist specializes only in substance abuse. A marriage and family therapist is limited to marriage and family, although they may also encounter other mental health related issues that are ingrained within the structure of a toxic or whatever type of family. Someone that deals with sex therapy, that certifies as a sex therapist. Someone who deals with sex offenders, that's a specialized certification. Dealing with grief is a specialized certification. Okay. Someone who's dealing with as a supervisor, someone who's supervising, does training and supervises. That is I had that specialty. Okay. But as a licensed professional counselor, my license itself allows me to function in any of those, because I got training and some exposure to all of that. Now, what can make me, or what can elevate me to expertise, is that I have worked and acquired knowledge and experience in specific said areas, and I have the ability to apply that and have positive responses. That's why, guys, when you look for a therapist, not all therapists are saying they specialize in certain arenas. Okay. If you look at my psychology page, I know I've been doxxed. You can go watch it. Basically, I'm an open book to YouTube because I've been doxxed. Everybody know basically the doxing that people have done only verified that I'm legit. That's why when people think that that I should feel a certain way, which I do to a certain extent about people who put out information about me personally and professionally, it doesn't bother me, because all you're really doing is finding out the things that I state are actually true. That's really what the information exposes. Public information that is accessible because I am legitimate. Okay, I'm not trying to hide. I'm not trying to operate under certain designations and so forth, or here and there, and I'm not visible. No, you can go look up my information. Okay, you can go look, and I don't care. Go look up my information. Coming into a space like social media, that's part of the positive or the negative. that you expose yourself to the world. And so the world sees me and they respond to me in such a way. Okay. But I don't know everything. Okay. I don't know everything about relationships. Now, do I have a certain level of expertise and training that the average Joe Blow doesn't possess? I sure do. Matter of fact, I have levels of training expertise that the average therapist doesn't have. Okay. As it relates to relationships in marriage. Okay. And that's just the fact. As it relates to mental health, because that is to me, that's my best expertise. That is my primary expertise is mental health. Okay. And so I pride myself, particularly early in my career, in dealing with lower functioning mental health clients, because those people are the most at need. They're the most difficult, the most at need. They're the most, I would say, those that are um, um, mistreated. Okay, they're mistreated and things of that sort, and they deal with a lot of social economical issues that we wouldn't think about because of their mental illness. Shout out to Justin. Justin states, did you work in private practice or an independent and inpatient facility? I've done both. I'm currently at my private practice right now. I actually have both. I've worked in an inpatient facility, but I have a private practice and I have a day program, which is an intensive outpatient related program for higher to low functioning mental health clients. I have worked at let's see, one, two. I've worked actually I have experience working at two inpatient facilities. I worked at one facility that was primarily mental health. I worked there for like 2 years in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and I'm from Louisiana. I worked there for like 2 years. And although they did have a substance abuse side, they were primarily mental health. And then when I moved to the state of Texas, while working on my licensure and accruing hours and so on, I worked at a substance abuse / mental health facility, and I worked in that facility for about another year and a half. Um, Most of my experience is community mental health, in which I am working with people who are functional enough to live in the community, but they're highly at risk of being hospital who are I'm sorry, who are hospitalized. Okay, I'm just sputtering on words. Many of them have a lot of hospitalizations. Okay, um, a lot of these clients, the average client I had basically in the first 5 to 8 years of my career, they may have had 10 or more hospitalizations in their life or more. Some have been hospitalized 10 times in 1 year. Some have stayed in the hospital for 3 or 4 months, came out, didn't manage for another 2 or 3 weeks, and they were right back in the hospital again. They're very recurrent. Hospitalizations are very expensive. And that's why a lot of the programs that we have, such as inpatient, outpatient services, partial hospital settings that are made for low functioning adult daycares, and so on, these facilities are created to help people who are at risk of hospitalization stay out of the hospital. We want to decrease recidivism rates among mental health clients. And also, it saves every state, a lot of money, because that's the most expensive form of treatment for any client. So yeah, I do have a private practice along with a intensive outpatient program, meaning that the clients are here for a set amount of time to receive certain psychiatric and psychological and counseling related services, and then they're able to go back to their place of residence. Okay. So again, if there are any mental health related questions, give them to me. I try to answer those questions as to the best of my ability. I'm willing to answer any particular question, as it relates to yourself or someone else or someone in your family, anything you've dealt with, or just something you've seen or heard on YouTube, because I really enjoy correcting a lot of the myths and the miseducation on YouTube. That was my reason for doing YouTube before I kind of ventured off into other areas. I actually enjoy properly educating people on mental health terminology. And I'm gonna be honest, if I don't know, like say for instance, Miss, I had a content creator, Stephanie Collins. I know she's not here, but shout out to Stephanie. She asked me to do content on ketamine therapy. The first time I heard of ketamine therapy was probably 2 years ago. Was not well versed on it. I would see a lot of it on Facebook, and I am not in favor of that type of therapy for various reasons. Okay, and I understand that it has certain benefits that I was able to read some articles, read some literature, and then I decided to do a video on it. Okay, and so I created, but I educated myself. And I told her when she asked me, I said, I'm not a fan of it, but I will give you a more educated response. Let me do some research to make sure that I'm clinically accurate on my stance as it relates to ketamine therapy. Now, for those that want to seek that, I would suggest if you're going to get that type of therapy, you need to go to a psychiatrist or a medical doctor. I would not advise you to go to someone who is not trained in the usage or to assess the effects of certain substances on your body. Although ketamine therapy, research-wise, has shown to be effective, but I don't feel comfortable because I was not trained in that. And the role of a therapist is not to give recommendations of any type of solution, medication, herb, etc., because that's not within my training frame of reference. Okay. Shout out to Mia Mines. She said thumbs up. Appreciate that. Justin said, "What's the clinical definition of narcissism versus pop culture definition?" Okay, I actually, if you watch my most recent video, because I am a licensed clinician, there is, and I had a lady in the Umar sector. Shout out to her. She's a licensed social worker. He talked about the difference between narcissism and narcissistic personality disorder. Okay. And I'm going to talk about the pop culture related. Now, the difference, there's really not, okay, the difference between narcissism and narcissistic personality disorder is that a person who shows some levels of narcissism may not show it in a way in which it affects various life domains and segments of their life, meaning that it doesn't necessarily, they show a level of narcissism that they may come off as if they are more self-involved, they have a grandiose sense, inflated sense of self, but it doesn't necessarily affect their relationships. Okay, they maintain those relationships. So a person may be narcissistic by showing a certain level of selfishness. They show a certain level of trying to exert themselves, of having a status that they don't have. Now, when you pivot to when it becomes pathological is when a person that has narcissistic personality disorder, they develop this over time. And in this situation, these people may act in ways that may be detrimental to their own mental health, meaning that they may involve themselves in activities. They may ruin relationships. They may become psychologically abusive to other people, because a person who has narcissistic personality disorder is always looking for validation from others, so that, and want them to believe that they are of a certain level that they're really not. Okay, a lot of people who have narcissistic personality disorder, they commit crimes. A lot of people that have narcissistic personality disorder, they commit certain types of crimes. They're con artists. They're constantly manipulating others for their own self-interest. Now, part of that manipulation, okay, is to convince you that they are of a certain status, they're of a certain level, that they're in all actuality they don't have. It's like a person who has a high school diploma want you to believe they have a master's degree, okay, and that they function at this Fortune 500 company and they dress the part, they look the part, they learn to speak the part. They're basically deception. It's deception. It is so deceptive that it is highly believable. The problem is that anybody can show some levels of narcissism, but there's very few people who are clinically narcissistic and have narcissistic personality disorder. Maybe less than 4% of the population have narcissistic personality disorder. That's why I cringe and I laugh and I just kind of just don't know what to say when people think all of these people are narcissists all of a sudden. This person. So I understand, and I don't use the term narcissism. I don't use that to describe anyone online, unless I'm on this in this channel and I speak about it clinically, because I understand that if I say the term narcissism as it relates to someone that I never met, never assessed or provided services for, it can be misconstrued as I am providing a diagnosis. Okay? Regardless. Okay? I have stated, because there are people who are obsessed with me in certain spaces, because I nearly said someone shows signs of or may potentially have. They gave that information to my board. My board dismissed it, but my board told me, you may want to restructure how you say certain things as it relates to these bona fide DSM diagnoses. Please do not relate that to anybody unless that information is public and available through their own mouth, or something that is documented that has been put out legally that shows that they have bipolar. Like that, let's just say there are certain entertainers that have publicly stated they have bipolar disorder or major depression. Now I can speak on it because they publicly stated that, and so I'm going to basically express my thoughts based on the fact that they publicly disclosed that information. But I cannot go about assuming someone has a mental health diagnosis or have a mental condition unless I assess them. So I don't dab into that arena. I stay away from it. On my channel, when I was doing the D Durrell live channel, when anybody started talking about mental health issues, I cut it short and I said, no, we're going a different direction. Just the mere fact of me being in that environment and allowing people to miseducate is, to me, it could be negligent in a sense. So I don't want anybody talking about mental health unless I, on any channel, give you the ability, I give you the go ahead to do so. And I don't like doing it because in many ways it's being misinterpreted. Pop culture definition. The pop culture definition of narcissism is anybody that does something bad to me that I don't like. That's basically what narcissism has been reduced to. Well, he bought me this and took it away. He's a narcissist. He lied to me. He's a narcissist. Okay? He stole this from me. He's a narcissist. He used me for sex. He's a narcissist. She did this. She's a that is not narcissism. That is not narcissism, because a lot of those negative behavior, you don't have to have narcissism to mistreat someone. You don't have to have narcissism to do something negative to someone, or to do something that someone deem as being hurtful. Okay. These are just people who may have other things that are comorbid to narcissistic personality disorder. Many people that are diagnosed with narcissistic personality disorder, may have a mood disorder. Okay, they may have a mood related disorder, or they may have some other behavioral disorder or been diagnosed with a behavioral disorder as a child or as an adult. Okay. Um, so no, I can't do that. Okay. So I tend to describe these things based on the fact that I'm in a structured environment, which is in this office, speaking as a professional, and I will speak about those things clinically. Okay. Um, but a person with narcissistic personality disorder, they are habitual in um, being deceptive for their own benefits that may be of a detriment to others. Okay. But a person that is antisocial personality, they do the same. It's just that it may look different. Okay. Um, it just looks different. It just look like, say, a pop term. A malignant narcissist is a pop culture term. And also, you may see clinicians use that term malignant, but I'm sticking to the DSM criteria. The term malignant narcissist does not exist in the DSM. Therefore, I'm not using it. Okay. I'm going to stay consistent with the field. I'm going to stay consistent with research. I'm going to stay consistent with the industry standard. I'm not deviating on anything to cater to people for likes and views. I'm not. I refuse to compromise the integrity of my field to be more entertaining and to be agreeable. The role of a therapist is not to be agreeable to their client. The role of a therapist is to provide a therapeutic environment that helps that client reach to a targeted behavior. Okay? To assist that client in whatever psychological, behavioral, emotional distress that they are in, to reach positive outcomes, to reach more functional outcomes, to extinguish certain behaviors that are counterproductive. Okay? And so there are tons of different types of therapy. There are hundreds of different types of therapy. Okay? And then there are therapeutic activities. Okay? And so therapeutic activities are not therapy. Some people look at going on YouTube as being therapeutic. I am one that is not a proponent of advising people to come on YouTube for therapeutic reasons. Although it can be therapeutic, you have to be at a certain functional level for me to advise you to do so. Okay? And the fact of the matter, the risk of that is that you're going to encounter so much toxicity that it can ruin whatever levels of psychological relief that you thought you were going to get by coming into these ways, because you expose yourself to so many types of people, so many types of dysfunctional people who may have mental illness or not, who act and respond in certain ways, okay, that is not necessarily in your best benefit. Shout out to Mia Mize, who sent 100 gifts and so on, I think. Appreciate you for doing that. Appreciate that. So are there any more Q&A? I'm just Q&A. Ask me any type of mental health question that you want. So I'm kind of focusing on that. Whenever someone asks me a medication related question, that's not mine. That is outside of my expertise. Okay. When certain people ask me certain mental illnesses, like say for instance, if someone asks me, D. Durrell, have you ever counseled a person that had schizoid personality disorder? No, I've never. I think I may have worked at one facility. I may have had one, but I've never treated a person with schizoid or schizotypal personality. I never have. Even those are cluster A personality disorders or paranoid personality disorder. I think I may, if I can remember, maybe a few that had paranoid personality disorder, maybe a few early in my career. But in the last 10 years, 15 years, no. No. So although I do have a lot of knowledge that I can draw from clinically, but I like to talk about the type of clients. I'm more I'm more confident talking about the type of clients that I have treated, which I have treated a lot of clients under that have a different amount of different illnesses. Okay. Nehemiah said, "This is my speed to rail. I enjoy the new content, real talk. Appreciate it. Thank you so much." Okay. So I talked about therapy, and I'm glad Nehemiah said, now you brought something in my mind. So a difference between therapy and therapeutic activity. Okay. Therapeutic activity, like someone like Nehemiah's. Nehemiah's does plants. There are a lot of clients that I have that enjoy agricultural activity as a way of managing their anxiety, their depression, and stress. They find putting their hands in dirt, planting things, watching it grow as being therapeutic. Pet therapy. Um, that is I'm not, listen, I'm going to be honest with you. Pet therapy is something that is highly, very highly effective with people managing their mental health. Okay. Um, I don't facilitate a lot of pet therapy because I'm not a big fan of pets. I'm really not. Not that I don't like pets. I'm just not a big fan of it. Although I have, I have been in sessions where I facilitated the pet therapy and I process utilizing their pet to help them cope with distress, with psychological distress. Now, would I advertise that type of therapy as a means of making that like a healthy percentage of my practice? No, I would never do that because I don't see that. I would only do it on an as needed basis, as it relates to the client asking me could they allow their pet. Like mainly, most of the times it's usually a dog. I've had situations where people brought a cat. And also when at one time when I was doing home therapy, when I would do home based related therapy, this was only by contract when I was doing contracts with other social service agencies. We would implement the pet therapy into their therapy, and it was quite useful. And having a pet is actually quite useful for anyone to manage their mental health. Okay. Now, in that pet therapy, I still would reinforce the fact that people still connect with people. Okay. Even though I understand that, but I don't want people to be codependent on using their pet to deal with their mental illness and not deal with other things as it relates to building positive relationships. So that's the perspective that I reinforce in therapy as it relates to pet therapy. Okay. So therapy is the structure in which I would allow that therapeutic activity to process. Like therapy is when you are utilizing person-centered or client-centered therapy. When you're utilizing cognitive behavioral therapy, if you're utilizing reality therapy or solution-focused therapy, okay, Gestalt therapy, dialectic behavioral therapy, which by the way is a form of it's kind of an outbranch of cognitive behavioral therapy. That is actually one of the newer forms of therapy that I am not an expert in. I have done research and I've also applied some concepts of it as it relates to emotional regulation, although I am not competent enough in talking about, learning mindfulness, interpersonal emotional regulation, and things like that. That relate. Although dialectic behavioral therapy is highly effective, and there's literature to support that, but That is a therapy. There's another form of therapy called um, internal family systems, which is a family therapy. Um, Not versed in that either, but it's very popular and effective. Okay. But I'm gonna be honest, if someone asks me that question, I will let them know that it's outside of my expertise. I don't practice that. I can speak of it, but as far as the implementation of it, to help you understand what that would feel like, the responses and results that I got from utilizing it, I go even listen. I don't again. I don't know everything. Okay, I don't know. I know a lot about a lot of things. Okay, some more than others, but I'm not going to sit here and in any professional environment, if anybody acts like they know everything about everything, that lets me know they don't know anything about it. About they don't know that much because that in itself, that is a bit deceptive. Not only is it deceptive, it's almost like you are being disingenuous as a professional. Okay. Nehemiah said, I need my plants and I need my pet and my plants. They are healing aids when you cannot reach a therapist. They are. Plant therapy, agricultural therapy is very, very it can be very, very rewarding. It can be very, very effective. Okay. So I'm gonna give it a little bit more time. If anybody has a question, everybody's quiet in the chat. Nobody wants to ask me a question. Just ask me any type of mental health question. And I'm gonna be honest, guys. You know where I get most of the most of my mental health questions are when people email me to just be more discreet. And I get it. I mean, this is an industry where discretion is highly reinforced. That's why we have HIPAA laws and issues of disclosure and not getting out personal information. I think that one of the biggest hurdles that the industry of mental health, or let's just say counselors have, is that I think in our industry, we have to learn how to normalize our profession in such a way that people don't feel like seeing a therapist mean I am mentally ill and crazy. Okay. And that is, to me, that's going to be an ongoing journey for mental health, because therapy, counselors, therapists, is synonymous with feeling like you are crazy. And I'm using the term crazy because that is the layman term that someone processes. Somebody said, well, you should get therapy. I ain't crazy. That's the response. I ain't mentally ill. I ain't got nothing wrong with me. And so I think as a therapist, one of my biggest jobs is to build rapport, to present myself as a professional, but to also ease you into understanding that you're seeking this service to be better and to improve, not to show that you have a certain mental defect, that everybody is going to look at you a certain way. And so that's the biggest thing. If we could alleviate the negative connotations of seeking mental health services, it would be normalized more, where people can say, I went to the doctor to go get a checkup, or I went to my therapist to get a mental health checkup, or get a mental health wellness exam, things of that sort. See, we normalize going to a doctor with physical health. We have not yet normalized seeing a therapist. Now, it's becoming increasingly more normalized, but it still has a certain level of taboo, a taboo label to it. Nehemiah asks, I want to ask about impulsive behavior. Any insight on this? Okay. So when you speak of impulsive behavior, I want to talk about the diagnoses that are more relative to that type of behavior. So when you speak about impulsive behavior, we're speaking of people who are bipolar, who can be very impulsive. You're speaking of people that have certain anxiety related or stress related diagnoses, something like obsessive compulsive disorder. Also, there's also a obsessive compulsive personality disorder. Okay, uh, there are things where people have something called trichomania, which deals with picking out. That's like an impulsive related illness where you're picking out the hair, and it's an impulsive reaction. Dealing with stress and anxiety and uncomfortability as it relates to your functioning, so where you're doing that to get some type of psychological relief. Okay. Um, People who involve themselves in impulsive behavior usually involve themselves in that behavior to deal with some level of uncomfortability, some level of stress, some level of the outcome of doing that behavior gives them a superficial sense of relief. Okay? Okay? And so a lot of impulsive behavior is grounded in fear. It's grounded in fear and it's and stress. Okay, for the most part. Um, or they're using that to cover up or to deal with a situation that they can't cope with. So people can impulsively eat. Like, say for instance, people impulsively that have like who are anorexic, they have an eating disorder or bulimia nervosa or anorexia nervosa. They impulsively eat or impulsively throw up or do certain unhealthy eating habits. There's a certain level of impulsivity to that as it relates to their psychology. Okay, so part of that is we want to replace those thoughts with more structured and more healthy behaviors, and also learn to um, minimize. Okay, we want to minimize the triggers, things that trigger those behaviors, and even if those behaviors are triggered, we're also going to utilize certain psychological counseling related interventions to help you come back to your base level. So yeah, I may feel a little frantic, but am I able to use progressive deep breathing, muscle relaxation, imagery, things of that sort that can bring me back to a calmer level so that I can make a better decision. Okay, but people involve themselves in impulsive behavior as a reaction to fear and anxiety and stress. Okay. Yeah, hobbies. Everybody's talking about therapeutic activities. Everybody's speaking of therapeutic activities right now. Okay, when they can't reach their therapist, these are things that I recommend in therapy. I do recommend people to exercise, walking, writing is very helpful for those that like to write, reading. I do for some clients, particularly a lot of my higher functioning clients, we may do more bibliography therapy, in which we're using a book as a self-help means to help you deal with certain issues. I utilize a lot of bibliography therapy as it relates to people who have gone through trauma and they're reading a book that focuses on that trauma. Storytelling. I do that a lot with children. I utilize that a lot with children and I sometimes with adults, where it's storytelling that presents certain behaviors and have certain outcomes to help people cope with their behaviors and other psychological stressors that do occur. Okay, so, and I want also to understand some of your reactions to impulsively can be conscious and unconscious or subconsciously done. Sometimes you're doing things you're not aware of. Some things you're doing things that you are aware of, but you can't stop as it relates to something. Something is triggering that. You've been accustomed to that. I am reading a book right now that I'm actually going to do one of my first, not my first, but I'm actually looking at a book right now that's focusing on habits and addiction, and it focuses on the addictions that human beings have that are not just regulated to substance abuse. They're talking about gaming. They're talking about eating related unhealthy things, addicted to devices, social media, etc. And it talks about the influences of that. And it's a very, very good book. I'm probably going to be finished with it probably sometime later this week or next week. And I plan to do a review, a book review, okay, on that. And so man, guys, I'm gonna be honest with you. I have about 4 or 5 book reviews that are coming up. So I've been spending a lot of time reading and researching and coming up with how I want to present those book reviews. I don't know. I think I'm gonna do the book reviews as a online streaming on my StreamYard, not necessarily going vertical, but I'm going to do a book review, and I'm going to advertise that particular book. A lot of these books are self-help, nutritional, mental health, health related type book, educational related books for anyone that chooses, that may be deficient or want to improve in certain areas. But I'm reading a good book right now that is focusing on that. Okay. So if there's not anything else, I am going to go ahead and end this particular live stream. I like to go live, particularly an hour, 45 minutes to an hour. So if there are not any other questions, please let me know. I'm open to it. I love answering and having these psychological, mental health related discussions on mental health as it relates to things that people may be interested in, I may not know, or just want a perspective. Again, our therapists don't operate the same. We're unique. Some people think that there's more than one way to treat a client. One client may treat a client one way, and then they may find a different way. That's why we practice. But we all should be competent in whatever methods that we use. That is what's consistent across the board. So with that being said, guys, I thank you all for being here. This is D. Durrell with D. Durrell Life Solutions. I'm getting back to the practice. I'm going to end my day, and then I'm going to create some videos and continue to read my books and preparing so that I can give a good book review. I have a great day. Peace.